Because our ancestors had that knowledge. Our ancestors were as spiritual as we are materialistic. Now, if we understand that, we'll see why it's so difficult to relate to our ancestors. We are deeply materialistic, deeply, deeply materialistic. They were deeply, deeply spiritual. That's the difference. And we need to reconnect with the spiritual aspect, because if we only go on the physical all the time, we're going to destroy that which keeps us alive in here, you know. And it's coming quite fast, because we only see money. We see the world as money. This is money to the farmer. He doesn't see it as plants. He sees it as money. People see everything as money now, the trees, everything. So because you see it as money, you have no respect. And you don't see the consequence. You don't see consequences. You only see consequences when you go above that and you see, oh, what are we doing? The consequences are horrible. You know, but people don't see the consequence. They just see, at the end of the day, what comes into their bank account. And that's a very dangerous force. And it's come to a point now we're so well equipped to be more and more and more efficient at it, that we're just accelerating the destruction of the life system that supports us. Whereas the spiritual, our ancestors, for example in Avebury, the ancestors' aim was to learn how the universe works and to learn to enhance the work there, to enhance nature, to help nature, you know. It's different, completely different. The opposite, actually. It's just an automatic reaction from a type of mindset. During the war, there were crop circles in this country, and people thought it was done by the Germans, you know. Oh, that was based on absolutely no facts whatsoever. They didn't even invade this country. And in Germany, when it happened during the war, they thought it was done by the English and the Americans. So again, it's an automatic. In the Middle Ages here, they thought it was done by witchcraft or fairies, they were called fairy rings and so on. So that's just the mindset of the time kicks in, and you go, well, it's logical, it's got to be done by men with planks, because that's the mindset of our time. We're mechanistic and we're materialistic. But there's nothing to support it. Whereas all the experiences that we've done, you know, we see that actually there is much more evidence that it isn't made by man than that it is. And it's easy to dismiss something you don't know. Anybody can dismiss something they don't know. First, find out. If you find out, you'll see that it's not man-made. There is absolutely, there's very, very little evidence on any level, you know. For example, in the country, this has happened here since the 70s. You can't keep secrets in a country. It's the same in every country. You go in Norway, I'm sure, in a rural area, if something happens there, everyone knows. You know, I say sometimes, you can have an affair in London, but you can't have an affair in Wiltshire, because everyone will know very quickly. That's the nature of a countryside mentality. People know what's going on. Nobody has ever seen any evidence of anyone entering fields at night for 30 years. That's not possible. It's not possible. Just on that level, you know, it just doesn't make sense. Common sense dictates that to do something like that every night for years and years and years, someone would rat on them. They would try to get the glory. They would try to make money out of this. They would be millionaire if they could do that. They'd go to Spielberg. You know, when they made the film, one of the greatest difficulty was to create these designs. It took them much longer than they thought. Yes. Months. You know, they thought it'd be done like this. It's not so easy. So ignorance is what supports that theory.
In your opinion, who is behind it then?
Well, that's the only question I can't really answer. I can't answer that question. I like to stick to, although I'm metaphysical is not, I would say that I tend to be more in a metaphysical realm when I study this, but metaphysical is not naive. It's not based on naivety. You know, and I absolutely tend to stick to facts. Symbols mean what they mean, and they've meant these things for thousands of years. There's no imagination in that, or you know, sort of imagination or whatever. It's based on facts. Well, crop circles are based on facts. They exist, they are imprinted, they mean something, they are the plants are affected, the soil is affected, we know, the time span is very short and so on and so forth. So I like to stick with facts. I don't like to assume or to make conjectures. We could conjecture for a long time. We don't actually know. It could be all sorts of things. But I don't know what it is, and nobody knows. We lean sometimes towards certain things. We know we're not just one-dimensional here. The new computers use the dimensions to send information. So if we can pierce other dimensions, it can be pierced this way. We can just common sense, but not even just common sense from a point of view of fractal, from a mathematical point of view. It's actually impossible to have one world that's alive and everything dead. It's impossible. That's not mathematically possible. If one world is alive, life is everywhere. Life is the norm as opposed to the exception. So, and another mathematical concept that we don't actually know, that science knows between 1 and 10% of all that exists, which means that from 90 to 99% is unknown. Why are we surprised something unknown appears? We live in the unknown. We live in the unknown. And now we're discovering something that some years ago people couldn't see even. So we're beginning to see that there are other aspects to our world that is here and manifesting. And what it's telling me is that there's consciousness in everything, at every level, And we're interacting with other consciousness. But what they look like, where they're coming from, I just don't know. Maybe in a few years we will. I don't know yet.
But you live in the area here yourself. What is the common opinion among people, the farmers and everyone living around here, do you think?
Well, the common opinion is actually, I would say that in this area, 98% of people have never seen a crop circle. The people you meet in crop circle are not the local people. You never meet local people, very rarely. You meet people who come from France, from Germany, from Norway, from America and so on. They meet here, and English people from outside. But there are few people who live here who have ever set foot in a crop circle or even seen a crop circle.
Why is that?
Because it's too far from the ordinary way of thinking. It's so far from our day-to-day way of how the world should be. We don't know the world we live in, but we think it should be in a certain way. And if it doesn't fit that desire that it should be in a certain way, it doesn't exist for most people. And they can't even see it physically. I'm telling you. I had a person at Chilhampton who came to prune our trees in our garden when we lived there. Chilhampton is just down the road. He said, "Oh yes, I heard there was a formation in 1991. He hadn't seen it. And he didn't know since 1991 that there had been anything else. He lives here in the valley. So it's a different dimension. And different dimension of vision, of thinking. You see, we don't live in the same dimension as these people. There's something quite... they cannot perceive it because they can't imagine it. That's the answer. And there's very few of us who are able to see these and interact with them. So if you don't know about it, you just assume it's man-made, but you have nothing to back it up, nothing to support this.
I mean, this is a fairly straightforward formation compared to many.
Yeah.
But we don't know what it's like from above yet. So even in quite a straightforward one, you can't work out on the ground what it is. Yeah. That's just walking through it, not trying to make it. Yeah. So you think some of these very, very complex ones, you can walk in them and not have a clue what they're actually like inside. And that's just looking at them. Never mind having to place that bit perfectly there with this bit perfectly here, etc. Now, if this is man-made, and we're not that happy about it, if it is, well, they've done quite well, but this is very simple. And then you think of some of these very, very complex formations, and it's mind-blowing, really.
It was back in 1991 that I first came across crop circles. I mean, I'd heard about them like everybody else, but it wasn't until I found myself down in Wiltshire in 1991 that I came across them, and I was astonished. by what they were. So from there, I've spent the last 13 years, investigating them along with everybody else, trying to find out what's going on, but also coming to grips with the fact that it is a mystery.
Okay, so, but you have also been writing books about this, and how do you feel that the public in general, what is their attitude to this here in England?
Most people believe what they're told in the newspapers, that nearly all crop circles, if not the whole of the crop circle thing, are made by men with planks of wood or garden rollers. And I think when you talk to people, that's the first thing that they will say. But what I find is when you actually start to talk seriously to them about it and you show them the evidence, their opinions will change very quickly. And what I've found is that actually people quite like mystery, and although they will go along with what they hear in the newspapers, they will very soon be willing to change their minds because they don't really like the idea that they might all be man-made. I think actually a lot of people are quite excited by other ideas. So when you show them the evidence, people's minds do change, and I think people here in England are more open-minded than they're given credit for.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But you have conducted various experiments on the crop circles. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
In 1991, we set up our organisation to study crop circles based in the southeast of England in particular, where there was no other study group. And we became known in time as Southern Circular Research. So we began to attract different people to our meetings. And when we became involved with a man called Vogelsberger, he was sort of a psychic and very interested in trying to use psychic means to see if we could interact with whatever this phenomenon was. So over the years, sort of up until the end of 1995, we conducted a series of experiments using sort of channeling, using psychic intuition to try to see if we could interact with this phenomenon. And our main aim was to see if we could get a crop circle to appear, partly in the hope that we could film it appearing, but also just to see if we could create a formation that would, somehow speak to us of having been the result of something that we had contributed to. And I mean, our most successful experiment in that realm was in 1995, and we gathered on top of a hilltop called Worcesterbury Hill, which is an old Iron Age hill fort. And we had a particular formation in mind that we had hoped would appear, and one of our team members had scrawled this on a piece of paper, and we sat on an energy line that the dowsers had told us were there, and we had crystals, and we played a certain sound that we had been told through Paul that we should be using, certain notes of music played as a sine wave, which is a very pure form of sound. Anyway, so we conducted this experiment at sundown one evening, and that very night, exactly that shape that we had expected appeared as a crop circle in the fields of Sussex. Now, we didn't make it. Nobody else knew what shape we'd chosen. It was carried out in total secrecy, and there was that formation. And other groups have conducted similar work. It's not just us. And what that said is that there is some interactive process going on here which basically can contribute to the creation of crop circles. But there were other things too. I mean, in the run-up to that experiment over the years, what we found was the more we tried to communicate with whatever was behind the circles, the more we had strange things happening to us. A number of our team members saw strange balls of light, just like the balls of light that people have videoed in and around crop circles over the years. Also, other strange sort of psychic things began to happen. It's like we were opening up and something was then feeling like it was invited in, and we all started to have very odd experiences. On the first day that we gathered at Paul Bure's house to discuss the experiments we were going to do, the first crop circle in Sussex of that year appeared in the field as closest to his house as it could have been. There'd never been one there before. And there again, I mean, what was the chance of that? So it was like something was tuning into us and saying to us, yeah, you're on the right lines. But whether that was something listening in or whether that was something we were putting out, we're not sure.
Okay. But over the years, there's been a development in the crop circles. Can you describe what you make of that?
Well, I mean, one of the more controversial aspects to this whole mystery is that the shapes have not stayed the same. They have clearly grown more complicated over the years, which has been the cause of many, many arguments. I think you have to choose your theory before you can explain that, because some people think that they're growing more complex because it is a message of communication, and it's like something slowly making little patterns to begin with which get people's attention very gradually, and then they're building it up a little bit more and a little bit more so that we're getting more information from them. But other people who think it's all down to psychic interaction or the natural energy fields of the planets think that maybe there's some build up there, some energy field, whatever, is building up and therefore contributing to more complexity. But I think to explain exactly why this is happening, I think is very difficult to say for sure.
So you don't have any personal theories of what's actually going on?
What I've found over the years is that anybody who chooses a theory and then will only stick to that one theory, nearly always, sooner or later, meets this brick wall where they can't go any further. Because then you come across a piece of information that challenges your theory, and then we've seen a lot of people over the years fall by the wayside when they've realised that it's not going to be this, or it's not going to be that, or it's not, and then they lose their enthusiasm. What I think is the best approach, and where I stand on it, is to be open to all the different theories. I honestly do not know for sure what is creating crop circles, and I suspect the ultimate answer will be a combination of all the different theories that have been put forward. But anybody who says that they know for sure, I'm afraid is either not telling the truth or it's at best a guess.
Okay. Is there evidence that the military has interest in this, do you think?
Over the years, we've seen various military helicopters hovering over fields, particularly in Wiltshire, clearly looking at crop circles. But I don't know whether that's evidence of any kind of conspiracy. I mean, we know that Salisbury Plain, which is an area where they train military personnel, is very nearby to some of the crop circle areas. A lot of helicopter pilots would probably just, in training, be drawn to these circles. It's a good thing to teach people how to sort of, hover around them, whatever. I don't know that the helicopters are evidence that the military are actually up to something. But that said, I'm sure they are more interested than they let on. Well, we have heard that the Ministry of Defence over the years have conducted their own tests on circle-affected crop. There have been cases where people have been removed from the field and military personnel have gone in. So this does happen. That does not say to me that the military know what's going on, but it may be that they are just as interested as you and I are to know what the answer might be. I know some people think that the military may create them using satellites and lasers and that. All I would say to that theory is, why would they test this equipment so publicly in front of everybody and then spend the rest of their time debunking it, as they seem to do, when there must be acres and acres of secret land they could test these things on? So personally, unless they're deliberately trying to stir up some strange double bluff, I don't think that logically makes sense that it's the military making them, but I'm sure they'd love to know.
Anything that you would like to add? I mean, is there things going on right now that you would like to say something about?
I think one of the problems where you have a phenomenon that nobody can actually explain is that you get factions of people who believe in one thing and not another. And what we're getting at the moment is this sort of there's a group of crop circle researchers who want to be taken seriously by the outside world, but what they're doing, knowing that most people on the outside world are sceptical, they're trying to appease the skeptics by saying, yes, they're nearly all man-made, but there's a few that are not. But in doing so, they're saying things which are completely unjustifiable. they are, I think, are being far too sympathetic to the sceptics, and I think they're betraying their own knowledge, because there are people who are trying to keep the sceptics happy who know very well that there's a large proportion of the phenomenon out there that is not so easily explained by humans. But in trying to appease those people on the outside in the hope of being taken seriously, I think is a big mistake. And I think the elastic will snap back and that they will not come out the better for it. We have to, I think, look at what is there in the fields and speak the honest truth about that evidence, however uncomfortable it may be, however stupid it may make you look. But we have to talk about what is there, not say what we think people want us to say. And I think that's the biggest mistake that's going on at the moment.
I see. There is also a piece of video around from the Oliver Castle experience, and as I have come to know, it's quite. There's a big discussion going on if it's real or not real. What are your feelings about that? Yeah.
The Oliver's Castle video is one of the most controversial things that ever happened in crop circle history. What I think is interesting is, by and large, most people seem to now accept it as a probable hoax. But nobody's yet, in saying that, been able to explain exactly how it was done. I mean, special effects experts have looked at this footage and said, well, you would need, at least several days, if not several weeks, to make this, even with the best equipment in the world. And yet, the man who allegedly took this video of the formation appearing under these balls of light was showing this video in a local pub on the day the formation appeared. So there's many unanswered questions that if he did fake it, how would he have managed to do it so quickly? Number one. Number two, why is it that though there have been claims and there have been talk of that he's confessed to having made it, whatever, there's still no definitive evidence that that piece of video is hoaxed? And even though allegedly the man people say was the man who took it has allegedly said that yes, he faked it, he's not managed to show how he faked it. And the conspiracy theorists say that he has been paid to say that he faked it, to cover up the real evidence. So when you're faced with a situation like that, you will never know the truth. So we don't. All I would say is, I think it's a very impressive piece of footage, and from what we've heard from eyewitnesses, from people who claim they've seen crop circles appearing, at the very least, it's a very good impression of what it must be like to see what a crop circle is like appearing in front of you. Whether it's real or not, I don't think we will ever know.
Okay. Have you yourself experienced these so-called balls of light by any occasion?
I saw the balls of light with a group of people in 1993 at Alton Barnes. It was at night, and it was over the fields, the east field, where many of the large formations have appeared over the years. And we watched a series of these lights, floating up, moving across the field at Alton Barnes. We also that year saw some very strange, dark, flickering shapes moving about over the fields in the very early hours of the morning, which again had no rational explanation. They weren't birds, they weren't planes, they were huge, like blocks of darkness, flickering very quickly from side to side with a strobing effect across the downs at Alton Barnes. So yes, I have seen very strange things associated with crop circles, which again other people have reported, but to say for sure therefore what it is impossible at this point.
But I also have heard that people have had different experiences with sensing kind of energies, or some feel very comfortable, some feel a kind of a discomfort. Have you ever felt any kind of physical or psychological effects on your own body when you have entered circles?
Some people are very sensitive to the effects of crop circles. I tend not to be that sensitive, but I have once or twice in going into a crop circle felt this strange tingling, like an electrical tingling going through me, which I have felt at stone circles, funnily enough. Not often, but just on a few occasions that has happened. I suppose with me I always think, well, maybe that's just me because, you know, I expect to feel like that or whatever. But there are people who have very profound effects and their health has been affected. I mean, there's tales of miracle cures taking place inside crop circles. There's also tales of people being very ill for weeks afterwards. Now, some of that could be psychosomatic, some of it could be pesticide allergy. But, you know, there's other things harder to explain, in particular the way electronic equipment malfunctions in crop circles above statistical chance. Mobile phones, video cameras, you know, there's many tales of them going wrong in a crop circle, and yet you take them outside and they'll work fine. So clearly something is being radiated or focused in the crop circle, which affects anything that you take inside it, whether that be us as people or equipment or animals. I mean, animals also have been known to behave very strangely inside crop circles. So something is going on there that does affect people, and I've only felt it a little over the years, but I'm sure there is something there.
Why do you think this is going on right now? I mean, at this time and age?
I think the reason for crop circles now, or certainly why they're proliferating so much now, because it seems clear to me there is historical evidence of crop circles going back hundreds of years. I think personally that's an absolute given now. But I think there is obviously something at work here which has led it to be on an upward curve of complexity. I mean, the numbers have levelled out now, but the complexity certainly does seem to be moving up towards something. Again, I think you have to choose your theory. If you think it's a communication, then obviously whatever's communicating thinks that we're ready for more and more every year. If you think it's psychic interaction, natural energy fields, you've still got to say something is building up, something is changing. I mean, we know a scientific fact that the Earth's natural energy fields are changing. The poles, the magnetic poles are moving, and we know this. So the crop circles could be some symptom or outward sign of that. But I also think that it may be that throughout history there has been a natural mechanism which will create simple circles, be it the weather or whatever, but maybe there's been a natural mechanism, but that something else has now either learned to tap that mechanism to make more complexity, or there's something else now coming in nature which is creating something using the same basic mechanism, but something that we have not seen before, or at least not in living memory. I know some people think that maybe years ago, you know, back in ancient times, the crop circles came. Maybe they come now and then in history when we need them, or just maybe as a symptom of the Earth's shifting energy fields. But whatever, there's a feeling that they're building up to something, some big event. Some people believe, for instance, the year 2012 is going to be a pivotal time. Maybe there's some herald of that. Maybe there's a big transformation, a big change in the offing. Certainly what crop circles do, wherever they come from, is they make people feel that there is some big change in the air. And whether they're intended to make people feel that or not is almost irrelevant. That's what they're doing to people. They're making people aware that there is something in the air, big change is afoot. And I think that whichever way you look at it, the crop circles are tied in with that in some way.
To people that has not heard about this before, I mean, like viewers that see this for the first time, what would you say?
Crop circles are mysterious patterns that appear in fields every summer and now around the world. Some countries get more than others, and it does seem to be more in the northern hemisphere than the southern hemisphere, but England for some reason seems to be the heart of it. The crop is not crushed, it's not damaged, it continues to grow and ripen with the rest of the field, and it's spiraled. And the circles, which seem to be the main components of the patterns, can be arranged in a number of ways, which creates more and more complexity. But also we've now had other patterns, triangles, rectangles, all sorts of geometrical combinations which create these very stunning pictures in the fields. Nobody really knows what makes them or where they come from. But what's happening around them is the interest in them is leading people to explore the realm of the mysterious. And each year you get more crop circles. Each year you get people saying they're all man-made, they must be a hoax. But equally, there's people who refuse to accept that and say, no, this is something which must be investigated more. It's very important. And so what we've found with the crop circles is it has created a whole forum for debate over the nature of reality. There's been nothing like it in modern history. And this whole adventure about arguing between the skeptics and the believers has created this magical space in the middle where we can discuss anything about what the universe is, and all because of these strange patterns appearing in the fields. But we don't actually know where they come from.
The scientific part is very important in establishing the credibility of this subject. And it's fundamental in doing that. But at the same time, if one is just totally scientific, one can lose the magical aspect of this phenomenon. And there are many people who've had the most fantastic healing experiences, and in a way their life has been changed due to these experiences. There was, it's rather like when people have had an out-of-body experience, they come back and they're different people, and their whole outlook on life has changed. They're more positive. Many of them realize they can heal. I mean, we can all heal, but these people then have an awareness of their ability to heal. And it's the same in a way in the crop circles. People have these wonderful events and they come back and they're sort of radiant people. And this is lovely. But I have to say, and I do have to emphasize this quite strongly, that not everybody feels well. And I'm perfectly certain this phenomenon is a beneficial one. It's not malevolent. But the energies that we're dealing with a set of very complex, subtle energies which interact in a personal way with our own metabolisms. And sometimes we may not be feeling well, or this, that, and the next thing, or they may not be interacting in a way that actually is congenial to us. And many people have felt nauseous. We've had some very strange reactions. So if anybody is, I always say, if anybody feels well, but it doesn't feel well, if they feel ill, come out very quickly. If anybody is pregnant, or thinking of becoming pregnant, I'd say don't go in, because we don't know really what we're dealing with. And most emphatically, if anybody's got a health device which is geared by a battery, for goodness sake, don't go in. We've had too many electrical failures, dramatic electrical failures. Sometimes I've been flying over a formation and the instruments in the plane have gone all haywire.
Okay.
And my camera refuses to work just when I've got the most perfect shot. Yeah. It won't work. Oh! And then other times we fly away and it comes back and it works. But I've made a list out. I went to, with a colleague, I went to the Royal School of Medicine and we tried to categorize all these effects. Mm-hmm. And what we found was, these are the effects, the categories. Oral. Now, in this particular category, we get extraordinary taste. It's like a metallic taste, except it isn't, but that's the only way I can describe it. And it's totally invasive, and you can't rinse it out, you can't spit it out, and it's sort of clawing in your mouth. And I was talking about this one time in Washington, D.C., and a man who was interested in spontaneous combustion, where very, very few cases actually survive, but one of the very few surviving cases, they described this metallic taste as this when the process was going on. Extraordinary. Tooth pain, unusual thirst, extraordinary thirst. I mean, really sort of galloping thirst, where people will drink litres and litres and litres of water afterwards. Cranial, that's headaches. We get all sorts of different headaches. We get migraine variant, which is a little unknown type of migraine. Ocular, that's vision changes and hallucinations. Auditory, well, that's hearing. Then gut, which is nausea, intense nausea. People feel as though they're going to be sick. I felt that. And you get out as fast as you can down a tram line. When you're outside the aura of the formation, It goes like that. It's sort of like radiation sickness. It's most bizarre. Diarrhea, sudden hunger. Now, sudden hunger, again, that's an interesting one because I'm not a frightfully hungry person. And I rather poo-pooed these reports, you see, from other people who said they were ravenous, they could have eaten a horse and all the rest. And one time we were doing hormone tests, and I'd had the people for lunch. We'd done the tests outside the circle. I had people back for lunch. We went into the circle, and as I came out, I was ravenous. Well, I'd had a very good lunch. So I couldn't believe it. So, you know, one just doesn't poo-poo these things. Systemic. Now, that's dizziness and weak knees, leg pain. A lot of people get leg pain, and it's all to do with a sort of stimulation of the hypothalamus, which is in the forepart of our brain. Mental. Now, this is the largest category because this is where our thought processes are affected. We get memory loss and feelings of panic and really going to feelings of terror and then evil. And on the other side, we get feelings of love and light and euphoria. And another strange one is a feeling of a sense of a presence, that you feel somebody is in there with you. And you look around and there isn't anybody. There was one particular formation in 1991 at Bythorn where people were doing a meditation. And one woman sitting heard somebody walk up and join them. She didn't open her eyes. And when she, at the end of the meditation, she looked around, there was nobody else that had joined the group. So she felt a bit stupid. She didn't say anything. But the man next door to her said, "Where was the person who walked up behind us and joined the group?" He'd heard it too. Nobody was there. So these are all very, very strange things. I think I have suffered just about every single one of these effects. It's interesting. I think it originates in many different ways. Really, in the formations, there are, in the genuine ones, the geometry is perfect. It's absolutely awesomely perfect, even if it's even if the formation is maybe 1,500 foot in diameter, which we have had, which is absolutely colossal. And when this happens, you very often get the diatonic ratio involved, which is a musical. It's on the piano, it's the white notes on the piano. Now this relates also to the figures, to geometry, and this is giving off frequencies. So you are being given off frequencies. Now our brain responds to music. The sound of the music resonates through the air into the brain. And you can go really quite weak at the knees. You know, you get an emotional response kickstart in the brain. And the same thing happens with images. And it's known as a sign stimulus, where the brain is responding to the frequencies and the shapes without the person actually being aware that this is happening. So I think this is what is inducing these states of altered consciousness. And it's really very lovely. Yes, people have these magical experiences. Also, when I've been giving talks, I've found that people come up to me afterwards with different reports. Sometimes people are healed. Has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the frequencies given off by the shapes which are interacting with their own personal frequencies. And then other people have had to close their eyes on a certain shape. They have not been able to look at it. It's affected them. So we are dealing with things that do in some way interact with our brains and our levels of consciousness in a most extraordinary way. I think we don't really understand our brains. I mean, let alone we can't understand this phenomenon, but we certainly can't understand our brains. I think, memory is not just located in the hypothalamus or any other place. It is our brains are holographic. And this, I find, is one of the most fascinating aspects of the thing, because you're examining the aspects of the brain too, the workings of the brain. And that is another subject which can keep you going really ad infinitum.
There seems to be a kind of an electromagnetic field or a force or a type of energy still remaining in the circle days after it's...
Yes, in terms of the energy, I believe it is the residual energy from the originating force, which is the electromagnetic field, because what we believe is happening is that the force originates probably in the ionosphere. And what we do know is that the ionosphere is at its lowest between 2 and 4 in the morning, and therefore the Earth's electromagnetic field is at its highest. And this seems to tie in very neatly with when the majority of formations appear. We know then that it comes down in a spiraling vertical form, hits the ground probably with hundreds of thousands of volts per meter, but just for a nanosecond, otherwise you get scorching. And then it hits the plants at the base, which soften quite naturally, and travels up inside the stems, breaking down the molecular structure as it goes, stretching the cells, because in fact what it is, it's a heating process, rather like a microwave, you know, it's cooking from the inside. And then when the heat gets too great, it comes out through the joints. You know, the plants have
Yes.
joints, and you get these tiny, tiny little expulsion cavities. So we do know that the electromagnetic field is a moving field. So what we're dealing is with the residual effects of the electromagnetic fields, which are lodged in the soil and in the plants.
All the different experiments that you have done, they confirm that there is a heavy energy issue, or
Yes.
that there is energy that creates a circle, of course, and also that remains for a period of time.
A period of time. Sometimes it all depends. People seem to soak up the energy like blotting paper. So if a lot of people go into a formation, the energy is of much shorter duration
Okay.
than if few people visit it.
Mm-hmm. But have you? I guess you have speculated on why and and how and all these questions. I mean,
Yes, well,
the
how is not so difficult apart from getting blocked by the intelligence. Whatever the answer is to the intelligence, the why I feel possibly could be, or yes, is to do with communication. I think if we thought we were the only people in this whole universe, it'd be not only arrogant, but it might be slightly lonely. I like to think of other beings being around. I'm quite convinced that they are benevolent people, and possibly we're sort of the Stone Age as compared to them, and we've got a hell of a lot to learn. And this seems to me to have been an evolutionary process that we've started off with very simple circles. It's rather like going to kindergarten, and then you progress slowly, year by year, you move up a stage. And this seems to be what's happening in the crop circle phenomenon, that we've moved from being very simple, easy to learn alphabet, and we're getting more and more complex.
So you don't think that it is actually the circle makers that are kind of developing their own technique, and that's improving every year?
You mean the unknown force, the unknown energy? Yeah. Yes, maybe they're improving as well. That I'd never thought of it from that aspect. Yes, maybe they are. I'd like to think of it as some great sort of imaginative project, maybe in the mind of the creator. But I mean, we do know that certain ones are man-made.
Yes.
We obviously do know that. But again, this is where I find it fascinating that you don't get these same effects in the man-made ones as you do in the genuine ones. I was doing an interview, I can't remember for whom, and they said, well, what would you do, Lucy, if this phenomenon was proved not to exist at all, that it was all a sham? And I said, well, I would find that even more fascinating, because I would like to have the explanation for what my scientific results that I'm finding. There needs to be an explanation for those. So it still ends up as, one just is on a journey of exploration, if you like. Fascinating, meeting wonderful people on the way, and just enjoying, because there's a beauty isn't there? There's a beauty to these formations which
There
is,
it is.
which is absolutely magical.
But do you see any connection between these formations in this area and the ancient sites that are all around the place?
Oh yes, very much so, because we have a network of energy lines or ley lines that go right around the planet, and in these particular areas where we got, well, Silbury Hill, Avebury, and in round here we've got a lot of Tumuli and barrows and ancient places, and in the old days our forefathers would walk along an energy line just as easily as if we would walk along the edge of that carpet. I mean, we can see at the edge of that carpet. They would follow an energy line as easily as we could follow the edge of the carpet. And they might come to a spot where they got a tingle, and they'd say, oh, I wonder what's happening there. And so they'd put a stone down as a marker. And somebody else would come along and they, oh, yes, something's happening here. And they put another stone down, and little by little you might get a sort of building up of a little sort of edifice, a little cairn or something like that. Then it might become an altar. And then it might turn into, in the old days, a chapel or a church, and eventually a cathedral. And Chartres and all the other cathedrals that we have, and the special places in England, are on these lines. And these lines are throbbing lines. And sensitive people, they know when they're on them, I can tell you. And looking out over the hills over there, that's the Pilgrim's Way, way up on South Harting. And there are lines radiating down from there.
But are they measurable with the scientific instruments?
No, they're not. You would have to have instruments which were so sensitive. And again, this is where it's way outside our budget.
But
The Russians are doing a lot of research onto subtle energies. They're way ahead of us. And there's somebody who also joins my team called Dr. Roger Taylor. He was one of our leading research microbiologists. And he works with somebody called Konstantin Kurokov, who's very well known as a physicist in St. Petersburg. And he works with Kirlian photography.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Kirlian photography is very interesting. Well, I was saying to a Russian, but surely he won't get sponsored, I said, by the government. And he said, well, yes, he will. Because apparently, if you have a gun and the number has been filed off so that you can't see it at all, it's absolutely not there, Kirlian photography will pick it up. It's still there in some sort of the magnetic field, electromagnetic field, the number is still there using Kirlian photography. And so we do this technique again with people going into crop circles, measuring their body aura.
And what do you find then?
We find sometimes it's depleted, sometimes it's increased. And the only person going into the formation last year where people were so badly affected, the only person whose thyroid actually increased was Isabel Maxwell Cade. And Roger Taylor sent me his results, which were really very interesting and totally compatible with the hormone findings. Apparently the thumb, the aura around the thumb, actually relates to thyroid. And Isabel's thumbs, aura before she went in, were very much smaller. When she was in the formation, they'd increased enormously.
Okay.
So that again tied up with the hormone testing, which was very interesting.
Kind of give a personal message to people watching this documentary that never really have maybe even heard about crop circles. I mean, what would you say to people?
Well, I would say that the best thing in the world would be to experience them yourself. Look at the pictures, read the books, go to talks. But there was one woman who came up to me after one of the talks and she said, you know, I've read all the books, I've been to masses of lectures, but she said nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the magic of actually going into a crop circle myself. So I would say to people, if you can possibly visit a crop circle, visit one, but always ask the farmer first, because it's his private land and it's his livelihood that you're going in, and it's his land. So always ask permission first. But I would say have an open mind. When you go in, have a completely open mind, because we all have our senses, which we don't necessarily understand. And if you let your senses really are the basis of everything, aren't they? If we, instead of ruling our senses, sometimes just let your senses rule yourself and see what happens.
Michael Glickman. In earlier statements that you have made, you have pointed out that the crop circles indicate a change of paradigm, or a kind of a dimensional shift. Do you still hold this opinion?
Looking back, I realised that I was absolutely right. There's no doubt in my mind that we're on this journey of change, and I don't, as I've said before, I don't think the crop circles are responsible for it. I don't think they're doing it, but I think the authors of the crop circles are very much aware of this, and they also realise that we earthlings, who are profoundly stupid, as well as divine, miraculous, inventive, graceful, loving, but thick, we don't know what's going on. And I think our cousins, who are the impresarios of the crop circles, are using the crop circles to aid our transition and to give us some clues about this important time.
But that brings up another question, and that is, if this really is important for people all over the world to join in, why is it that this particular phenomena is appearing in this particular place on the planet?
Oh, come on, that's a silly question. That is a silly question.
Why?
Number one, because I don't know, and nobody knows why it's here. But then, this is like saying the Wright brothers flew their aeroplane, they developed it in Ohio. Didn't they realise that aviation was important for the whole world? Everything has to start somewhere. And you can say, why here, why here? Well, it will spread. It's spreading already. And the Wright brothers chose that area because they were making bicycles and they knew that area, so that's where they started. Now, who can say why the crop circle authorities, the crop circle engineers, why did they choose this area? This is a deep question which we could go into, but it's a question which is limited in time. Historically, it is of importance, but in the last 20 years, we've seen the way it's spread. I mean, where are you from? You're from Norway. How did you find out about it? Suzanne Taylor's from America. Andreas Müller is from Germany. There are people from Australia. It spreads. It doesn't matter where it starts. If for historical reasons you wish to go into the possible reasons for the selection of this beautiful valley as the heart of it, then we could discuss that. But everything has to start somewhere. The crop circles started here. But they will be everywhere. One Thursday afternoon at 4:15.
But still, even when it's a fact that these formations are here, I mean, clearly visible to everyone, why do you think it takes so long before the general public recognize them?
We're not ready. We're a long way from ready. What can you say about the stubbornness of our species, you know? I mean, we're driven fundamentally by a need to survive. This is our dynamo. But a subsidiary part of this dynamo to enhance our survival is we must keep the world the way it was yesterday. This is a desperate, fearful enterprise. Resist change. And the amount of terror, real terror, that is embodied in the idea of change is breathtaking. And fundamentally, people are very frightened, not by the crop circles, but by the shadow of the crop circles, by the implications of the crop circles, because if the crop circles are real, well, of course they are real, but if the crop circles are real, this destroys science, religion, philosophy, history, psychology. People don't want that. I mean, again, to go to the Wright brothers, they flew their aeroplane in 1903. In 1907, Lord Baden-Powell, who was the chairman of, I don't know, the British Aerial Society, which was to do essentially with hot air balloons, sent a letter to all his members saying, you will have heard rumours from America about a heavier than aircraft flying. Don't worry about it. This is impossible. And a lot of men and women all over England, whew, thank goodness. Thank you, Lord Baden-Powell, for reassuring us that this cataclysmic change in the world was not going to happen. And suddenly we're faced with crop circles and the implications of what will be the biggest cultural shock this planet has ever received. Of course people don't want to know. Of course they're scared. Of course they prefer to say, oh, it's all hoaxes. Go away, go away.
Yeah, but I mean, speaking of the hoaxers, what is your comments to, the general opinion that they're all are made by people just fooling around?
The idea, I don't want to speak about this. It's a waste of our energy. But what I have to say, and here is a rule, a law, an absolute truth. The only people who believe they're all made by men are people who know nothing about it. It's very easy to support the hoax hypothesis with your head buried in the sand. It is impossible to believe they're all made by men if you've seen one, read a book, seen a video, been to a conference, been to a lecture. These people haven't. But listen, I don't want... it's not my intention to upset people, you know. And if people sleep better, as most do, believing that crop circles are a slightly funny joke produced by people from the pub, then I don't mind. That is their life and their world.
But are there codes in these patterns, or are the patterns themselves just it? I mean, are there layers of information here, do you think?
Well, you see, it's very hard, isn't it? Because I mean, I get information from them at a certain level, and other researchers get other information at another level. But I don't believe the crop circles are messages. I believe the crop circles are communications. They're much more subtle, and I've used this before, but I'll say it again. A message is when you call home and you tell your wife to switch the oven off. As a message. A communication is when you go home and you stroke her hair. These are communications. And I think in our world we want messages. Tell us to turn the oven off. Should we turn the oven off? What should we do? And what the crop circles are doing, they're just stroking us. They're just saying, hey, the important thing about the crop circles is that we are here and we care. That's the most important thing. Now, once you establish the fundamental of this communication, we are here and we care, it's possible to go further and to take a deeper and more subtle series of ideas from the phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. But who is it, Michael? I mean, who are sending us these things?
Mrs. Ivy Burnsall of 137 Rose Grove. What do you mean, who is it? Who is it? Others. I don't know. Who is it? You want me to give you their visiting card? I don't know. I mean, I think it's our cousins who care for us very deeply, and we will get to meet them, and or maybe we won't. I'd like to think we will get to meet them, and I think, look, whatever happens, I would stake everything on the idea that we are moving into the era of the greatest transformation this planet has ever experienced. And it's not going to be easy. But
why do you think that is happening in this particular period of time? Why right now?
Well, I think the 2012 thing is significant, and I don't fully understand it, but there are so many layers in the 2012 thing that it shatters all our conventional views of causality and physics and time. How could the Mayan civilization have so accurately known about 2012? How could they have understood this? And then, if you read Jeff Stray's book, which is a masterpiece, you see that many other civilizations hit on exactly the same date. There's that. There's also the thing of the way the Earth seems. There is the idea, and I don't know, about the Earth passing through various belts and various physical changes and pole shifts. All these ideas are coming up. They all seem to relentlessly snap back like an elastic band to 2012. Mm-hmm. And I just have this vision of gigantic machinery clonking over, big iron cogwheels as big as a continent, clonking over, and everybody in the universe, all consciousnesses in the universe have been waiting for this moment. And we here in planet Earth, we're you know, blissfully ignorant. I mean, look at the irony of our situation. On the one hand, the biggest killer of our planet, our way of life, our health, is fossil fuel. On the other hand, the most treasured commodity on planet Earth, for which people will launch massive wars, is fossil fuel. Now, this is bewildering, and we're looking at reality through the wrong end of a telescope and not seeing what's there. And I just have this sense that outside there are a million intelligences, tumultuous, turbulent, clamouring, saying, for God's sake, wake up down there. What are you doing? And I think the crop circles are part of this.
Yeah, but I mean, what very naturally pops into your mind is that if it's that critical and if it's of such a concern of those or the others, why don't they intervene more directly than doing it on this very discreet way?
For two reasons. One is ethical and one is practical. You know Star Trek.
Yeah.
You know the prime directive of Star Trek. The prime directive to the Star Cruise was that they must never interfere directly into the affairs of a less evolved civilization. And I believe this is a very sacred, ethical constraint. And Gene Roddenberry was remarkably prescient in having this idea, but I believe it's a real idea. It's an absolutely pure moral imperative. Don't screw up. You know, I mean, this world has a history of marching in and saying, we will give you Christianity, we will give you our medicine, we'll give you our technology, right? We screw them up. And I think on a planetary level, the consequences are more severe. So I think ethically, they stand off. Practically, they know us better than we know ourselves. And the old question, why don't they land on the White House lawn? Well, this would be landing in the grounds of a lunatic asylum where the lunatics are armed. What would we do? We would try and nuke them. Now, in fact, they're so evolved, technologically as well as spiritually, that the idea of harming them, you know, is a joke. But our world would fragment, it would unravel. I believe the biggest shock in the world will be the moment where we have to grit our teeth and say, there's someone else out there, and they're brighter than we are, they understand more than we do, they're more gracious than we are, they are more loving than we are. They're knocking on our door. They don't want to sell us anything. They don't want to take anything from us. All they want to do is care for us. Biggest shock planet Earth will achieve, and it will unravel catastrophically. And I think they are standing off because they have this dilemma. On the one hand, they want to come in and help. On the other hand, they know that coming in to help, they will be debunked, rebutted, attacked. They will be told that they are hoaxers.
So, how can we then, as a civilization, I mean, how can we establish contact without breaking this universal rule?
Well, you say, before I go further, let me remove from your question the three words, as a civilization. Because I think we have seen that our civilization is limited and corrupt and wicked. So I don't think as a civilization we can do anything. I think we can do a lot as individuals, and I think all we can do as individuals, and it's a substantial amount, is each fashion our small brick to add to the big wall. Mm-hmm. That's all we can do. There'll come a time when the world says, oh yeah, we knew that. We knew that all the time. But there's no way we can act as a group. I fear.
You know, being here in Wiltshire and seeing all this military activity in this area, you know, planes all over the place, bombshells going off not far from here. And the fact that the crop circles appear here every summer. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, look, I have to say what I've said before. My email is not packed with communications from number 10 Downing Street, from the government, from the Department of, from the Ministry of War or whatever they call it. I don't know what they think. I don't know what they do. Whatever they do has to be a matter of speculation. I would be very surprised if they haven't done some work on the crop circles. I would be very surprised if fundamentally they are not of the basic view that the crop circles are the work of hoaxers, because soldiers are also humans and they don't want to. Soldiers have not got the imagination to face the wider implications of the crop circles. So I'm sure they will have looked around the edges of it, but I mean, can you imagine being the guy looking at this who has to send a memo to Tony Blair saying, "Dear Mr. Blair, we cannot explain this. We think the source of the crop circle phenomenon is non-terrestrial." Can you imagine having to take that responsibility? It doesn't happen. They're part of this consciousness as well.
And that's why the media is also so...
Yeah.
Yeah?
Imagine being the editor of a newspaper who has to publish a headline, "Earth is round, official." You wouldn't want to do it, you know.
What is your new book about?
The crop circles. It's a memoir. It's about my personal story. No one knows what's going on. I don't know what's going on. So I'm just sick of half-baked textbooks, you know. I don't know what's going on. I have simply written an honest account of my involvement in the crop circle phenomenon from 1990 to 2003 as a memoir, honestly written, so people can make of it what they will. There is no index, there is no bibliography, there are no references. I have no aspirations to stating facts or theories. I'm simply giving my own experience. So it's a memoir. Yeah.
When did you get involved in this and why? I mean, just to look back at the history of this.
Gee, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I was an architect, you know. And as an architect, I was always very interested in the way things were put together. I loved, as I still do, making things. And I also did a lot of engineering and product development. So I was spending a lot of time in factories. I was always very impressed with the ingenuity of the production engineer. I was also interested in movies and spent time around movies. All my three sons are in film. So I've always been close to special effects and things like that. So my architecture gave me an interest in shape and geometry, number. And then, as a human being, I was always interested in the strange, the unusual, spontaneous human combustion, flying saucers, all that stuff. And I'd been watching crop circles, thinking, oh, that's very interesting. And then one day, I opened the newspaper and there was a picture of the big Alton Barnes pictogram in July of 1990. And I said to my youngest son, I'm going to drive down there now, and he said he'd come with me. And I walked into this crop circle, and I felt at that stage with some real arrogance that I knew how everything on the planet was made. I mean, I know about aluminium and plastic and wood and steel, and I know about the way they're put together. I know about the way scenery is made, a scene for films is set up. And I walked into this crop circle and I was bewildered. That first crop circle, I went in and I thought, this is other. This is from elsewhere. I do not know who could have put this together, or how, or why, or in what form, or with what purpose. I was bewildered by this. A bewilderment which has stayed with me to this day. I mean, the other thing about the dumb supporters of the hoax hypothesis is that they are never makers of things. You know, you say, oh, somebody made that. But you'll never find a builder or a designer saying, oh, somebody made that. They think, oh, if somebody made that, I understand how much effort and organisation and planning will be involved. Most people don't ever organise a project like this, so they don't know what kind of effort would be involved.
As a closing, what would you say to a person seeing these things or becoming aware of these things for the first time? Like, I mean, if this interview was broadcasted or whatever, I mean, what do you say to the person who's never been aware of this before?
Open your heart. Open your heart. Open your heart.
Simple as that.
Simple as that. What can you say? I mean, I am as bewildered as anybody, but I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. That's all. But I'm still adrift. All we can do is open our hearts, ignore the stupid consensus, ignore the worldview, and open your individual, personal heart to which no one else has access unless you give it to them. Open your heart. Respond.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.